Discover how a man's bride payment unveiled an incredible journey of grace and unexpected hope. Jack stood in the middle of the town square, his heart pounding as Mark's laughter echoed around him. The sunlight glinted off the polished surfaces of nearby shop windows, but their brightness felt cruel against the shadow of embarrassment creeping up Jack's spine. He had worked tirelessly to gather his dowry, a humble payment cobbled together from friends and family, a true testament of loyalty and love. But standing there, with Mark and his entourage of privileged friends, Jack felt the weight of their sneering derision. The bitterness of ridicule bit harder than any saw against flesh. "Did you really think you could win her with this?" Mark's voice rang out, slick and sharp. Jack clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. He could see Emily, just behind the crowd, worry etched across her beautiful face. How deep was her love, and what was it worth in this harsh world? The agony of her disappointed gaze threatened to topple all his resolve. A first dilemma shook Jack to the core: honor his mother, who depended on him as her strength dwindled with each passing day, while he struggled to uphold a traditional standard that felt worlds away from his reality. Could he protect Emily's heart when the means to provide for her faltered like his hands on unyielding wood? The pressure mounted, tightening around him like a vice, squeezing out all thoughts of triumph. As the laughter receded and the crowd shifted, Jack's mind raced. With every step he took away from Mark's jeers, he found himself retreating into an even darker disquiet. Was Mark's financial superiority the only measure of manhood? The thought ignited a storm within: fear, frustration, desperation. He had always thought talent and hard work could shape a future, but now doubt gnawed at his spirit. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Reeling from the moment, Jack stumbled home where he often found escape in the familiar scent of sawdust. Woodworking was his sanctuary, a place where he could channel his turmoil into creation. But recently it had felt hollow, as if the weight of the world pressed too heavily against his chest. The frames and tables he fashioned seemed trivial compared to the enormity of his dreams, and here loomed the specter of Mark, an insistent reminder of his supposed inadequacy.
While rifling through his grandfather's attic, he discovered a weathered journal amidst old furniture pieces. Page after page revealed tales of craftsmanship, breathing life into forgotten traditions. Drawing deeper into each sketch, Jack felt an ember ignite within, a flicker that drove him to build something meaningful. But could this spark be enough to overcome the darkness threatening to envelop him? As Jack faced each new competition, the shadows of Mark's mockery loomed large. Stepping onto the precipice of his burgeoning business, each success felt fleeting and precarious. Torn between the pressure to uphold family honor and the beating heart of his love for Emily, Jack sank deeper into a turmoil of uncertain ambition. Would he crumble beneath the superficiality of wealth, or would he emerge stronger, defined not by what he lacked, but by the essence of his craft? With the annual craft fair approaching, Jack stood at a crossroads where love, loyalty, and his hopes for success hung agonizingly in balance. As he grappled with the fear of failure, an unsettling truth loomed. Were he and his dreams truly strong enough to withstand the storm? The answer remained elusive, fueling the tumult of anxieties tucked beneath his surface, a tempest waiting to break forth. In that quiet moment of reckoning, the stakes surged impossibly high, leaving every question suspended in the charged air of the unforgiving town of Maplewood. As dawn broke over Maplewood, Jack woke with a tightness in his chest. The events of the previous evening echoed in his mind like a persistent drumbeat, urging him to confront the self-doubt that clung to him. He couldn't shake the image of Mark's smug face, nor the laughter that had sliced through his confidence. Determination ignited within him, forcing Jack to envision the possibility of transformation. He stepped out of bed and into the workshop, the familiar scent of wood and varnish slowly dispelling the remnants of insecurity. Each piece of timber before him reminded him of his vision, functional, beautiful objects imbued with passion and purpose. But that vision now felt dangerously tethered to his self-worth. Could he channel his frustrations into creating something worthy, not just for himself, but for Emily? Jack took a deep breath, turning to the old journal he had unearthed. It was a record of dreams, unfinished projects, and lessons learned the hard way. Flipping through the pages, he noticed drawings that seemed to resonate with his burgeoning sense of purpose. What if, instead of merely entering the fair as a competitor, he could approach it as an artist sharing a narrative through every piece? With newfound clarity, Jack meticulously planned his approach for the upcoming craft fair. Each item would be crafted not just for sale, but to tell his story, a manifestation of love for Emily, his family's legacy, and his own journey of growth.
He envisioned a collection that encapsulated both resilience and aspiration, something that could stand against any ridicule Mark may throw his way. Days turned into nights as Jack lost himself in his work. He meticulously selected wood that spoke to him, transforming rough pieces into polished final products that mirrored his evolving self. The more he shaped the wood, the more he excavated layers of his own character. Each chisel stroke felt like a step toward reclaiming his self-esteem and purpose. And with every finished piece, profound revelations dawned upon him. His craftsmanship was not a measure of wealth, but of integrity. Yet with each creation, the anxiety of judgment loomed closer. What if the people of Maplewood didn't see the value hidden in his work? Doubt would come crashing like waves, threatening to pull him back under the weight of inadequacy. He wrestled with the nagging question of whether Mark's influence could be silenced, if only in his own mind. Confronted with this inner conflict, Jack sought out the solace of Emily. Sitting together on the porch, they discussed dreams and aspirations while the sun dipped below the horizon. Her unwavering belief in him lent strength to his faltering faith. "You have so much more to offer than just what's on the surface," she said, her voice soft yet filled with conviction. "It's not about what they think, but about what you know you can create." Her words lingered, sowing seeds of resilience within him. As he returned to the workshop, determination surged through his veins. The fair was not merely an opportunity to showcase his talent, but a chance to rise above the judgment that had once paralyzed him. With the opening day looming on the horizon, Jack felt the weight of anticipation pressing in. His creations now represented more than mere objects. They were tokens of love, labor, and a journey towards self-discovery. But as his heart raced with both excitement and fear, he couldn't ignore the question that simmered just below the surface. Would his work resonate with others? Would it be enough to drown out the echoes of ridicule? The night before the fair, Jack stood before the polished pieces he had crafted, each one a beacon of hope and hard-fought determination. Yet a single thought hung heavy in the air. Was he ready to face Mark head-on, to challenge the remnants of his own perceived inadequacies? The answer loomed like a shadow in the dim light, leaving him teetering on the edge of a pivotal moment. The time had come to face the crowd, and the true test of his resolve. As dawn broke over Maplewood, Jack felt as if the weight of the night still clung to him, a heavy blanket of sweat and anticipation. The fair was just hours away, and he had scarcely slept. The polished wood pieces he had agonized over now sat silently on the workbench, waiting to find their purpose. Their surfaces gleamed with a warm, inviting glow, yet he wrestled with an undercurrent of anxiety that grew sharper with each passing moment. He took a deep breath, stirring himself into action. Stepping into the workshop felt like crossing a threshold. It was more than a space filled with tools and timber. It was where he had forged his aspirations. Today, it was the arena of his confrontation. He arranged the items with meticulous care, hoping their aesthetic appeal would drown out the dread that seemed to echo in the corners of his mind. As he prepared, Jack couldn't suppress the intrusive thoughts about Mark's impending presence. Would Mark laugh? Would he belittle every effort the moment he laid eyes on Jack's creations? The world outside his workshop now felt alien, a daunting crowd of critics he would face in mere hours. Yet a flicker of his resolve resurfaced. He wouldn't let past shadows dictate his worth. His creations were a testament to his journey. In those moments of solitude, Jack reflected on his artistic narrative, clinging tightly to the meaning each piece held. The wooden heart he carved for Emily was a reminder of their shared dreams, a pledge to cherish the love that motivated him. A set of intricately detailed coasters represented his family's history, each line and curve a tribute to the roots he had almost abandoned. He envisioned how they would inspire connections with those who saw them, nurturing a dialogue about resilience and growth, one piece at a time. Yet, as the sun crested higher, urgency pulled him from his reverie. The fair awaited, and so did the potential for judgment. He ventured outside, inhaling the fresh morning air and allowing the cool breeze to drive away some of the tensions swelling within him. As he walked toward the venue, the vibrant energy of the surrounding town became palpable. Vendors were setting up booths, laughter floated through the air, and children ran past with bright faces, seemingly oblivious to the anxious thoughts winding through Jack's mind. In the midst of the bustling atmosphere, he finally caught sight of Mark. Anxiety twisted in his gut, but he couldn't afford to retreat. He deliberately steadied himself, reminding himself of Emily's encouraging words. With every step, he pledged to confront the specter of ridicule. They exchanged a brief nod, and Jack felt a flicker of defiance rising within. He wasn't competing against Mark. He was competing against the doubts that had haunted him for too long. Finally, in front of his carefully arranged pieces, Jack took a moment and closed his eyes. His heart raced, pounding a rhythm of determination and fear against his ribcage. This was his story laid bare, and he was ready to share it with the world. As the first visitors trickled past, he straightened his back and mustered a genuine smile, inviting them into his narrative.
Just as he began connecting with onlookers, a familiar laughter broke the air, sharp and mocking, just like he recalled. Jack's gaze snapped toward Mark, whose smug expression turned condescending as he approached. In that moment, Jack's breath caught. This wasn't merely a chance for validation. It was an opportunity for a reckoning. The confrontation he had so narrowly avoided was now unavoidable. What had been anticipated dread transformed into something else, an ignition of purpose. "Let's see if you can stand on your own," Mark called out, stepping into the spotlight of Jack's moment. The tension in Jack's heart escalated. He could either shrink back into the shadows of self-doubt or rise above, embracing his truth. It was clear. He would have to confront more than just Mark. Unbeknownst to him, this moment could redefine everything he believed about himself. The crowd's murmurs faded as Jack steadied his voice and prepared to speak, his inner resolve solidifying. "Why don't you come take a closer look?" he challenged, his heart ingrained with newfound confidence. With every ounce of courage, Jack took a step forward, ready to face the tides of judgment. Would he silence the echoes of ridicule once and for all? What awaited him beyond this pivotal moment? The air hung thick with tension, a palpable silence that enveloped Jack as he desperately scanned the faces in the crowd. Each gaze seemed to amplify the stakes. He felt simultaneously vulnerable and empowered. Mark's sardonic presence lingered like a storm cloud, casting shadows on Jack's fledgling confidence. The challenge had been issued, and now he stood, not just against his former bully, but against every doubt that had ever plagued him. Jack's fingers trembled slightly as he motioned toward his woodwork, a tangible extension of his soul. "These pieces are not just crafted wood. They represent who I am and where I've come from." The words spilled out, raw and uncalculated, fueled by a surge of adrenaline. Mark stepped closer, curiosity mixed with skepticism. "You really think that junk can impress anyone?" he scoffed, crossing his arms. There was a smirk on his lips, but Jack discovered a glint of vulnerability behind those confident eyes, a reminder that even Mark had once been a frightened child, hiding behind bravado. Inspired by that fleeting thought, Jack decided to share the stories behind his creations. "This heart was carved for Emily," he announced, his voice steadier. "It represents our dreams, our promises. And these coasters? They are reminders of family. The lines tell a story of resilience and strength." He noticed a few visitors tilting their heads, intrigued. Encouraged, Jack elaborated, gesturing animated now, his passion igniting the space around him. "I put a piece of myself into every curve, every detail." As he spoke, Mark maintained his stance, but something had shifted in the atmosphere. Jack noticed his former rival's condescension wavered, replaced by an uncharacteristic silence. This wasn't just a showcase, it was a transformation of power dynamics, a reclamation of self-worth. He reveled in the realization that he had authority here. No longer was he the timid craftsman hiding from judgment. He had become a storyteller, an artist. One visitor leaned in closer, inspecting the detailed grain in a set of coasters. "This is beautiful work," she commented, and Jack met her gaze, his heart swelling with pride. Emboldened, he turned back to Mark. "You might see this as junk, but this junk has a story, a purpose. What have you created lately?" The question hung heavily in the air, pulling the crowd's attention toward Mark with a sense of anticipation. Mark's facade of confidence cracked minutely as he retreated a step, caught off guard. Jack couldn't help but reflect on the irony. While Mark had always belittled him for his artistic ambitions, here he stood, looking down on a house of cards threatening to collapse. Suddenly, an older gentleman stepped forward, interjecting, "I see the love in your work, son. Don't let anyone cloud that." Jack's encounter with this random supporter turned the tide completely, providing a warmth that felt like a protective shield. Jack faced Mark again, the surge of invisible support bolstering him. "This isn't just about me. It's about being brave enough to pursue what I believe." In that moment, Jack realized it wasn't even about proving Mark wrong. It was about honoring his journey, fostering confidence, and nurturing the connections he had forged through creativity and love. As the crowd began to gather more around him, Jack felt the swell of a community, a fabric woven together through shared experiences, whether they were fans of woodworking or seekers of inspiration. Mark's reputational power was being stripped away, piece by piece. Yet, as Jack absorbed this realization, a voice whispered at the back of his mind. Could he sustain this newfound strength? The crowd was now engaged, visibly captivated by his message. He felt their energy rippling through him, but with success came deeper questions. Was he prepared for the future, to maintain this confidence against the shadows that still whispered doubts? Just then, Mark's expression shifted, flickering between defeat and something hard to define. Did he sense that with every moment Jack reclaimed his narrative, he was losing his grasp on influence? With the fair unfolding and possibilities alive in the air, Jack stood at a crossroads. Could he capitalize on this moment, embrace new challenges, and elevate his craft? The horizon shimmered with hope, yet he knew the next step would demand more resolve than he had ever shown. And in that realization, an unsettling question lingered. How far would he go to defend his story when faced with greater obstacles than Mark?
Jack felt the pulse of the crowd around him, their collective energy a tangible force that infused him with determination. He had unveiled parts of himself through his craft, each piece a testament to his journey, a journey characterized by fear and resilience. Now, standing before those who valued his work, Jack felt a flicker of ambition ignite within him. But with ambition came uncertainty, a gnawing sensation that this moment might simply be the spark rather than the flame. He turned his gaze back to Mark, who stood silently, his earlier bravado faltering. Jack's heart raced at the dilemma. How far could he push this newfound confidence? Would he take on more significant challenges, risk greater disappointments? But this encounter was not just about Jack. It was about crafting a new narrative, a narrative where he dictated the terms of his story, and not Mark, not anyone else. Suddenly, a longing ached in him to reach for more. What about taking his woodworking to the next level? What about not just showcasing his pieces, but teaching others, guiding budding artisans to find their voices? The thought was intoxicating, yet daunting. Did he have the skills, the knowledge to step into a leadership role? A woman approached, her eyes shimmering with enthusiasm. "Could you show me how you transform a simple block of wood into something so beautiful?" Her question hung in the air like an invitation. "Of course," Jack surprised himself by answering, the energy of the moment shifting yet again. "Maybe we can set up a workshop? I would love to share what I've learned." The woman nodded eagerly, and Jack could see the fire igniting in her eyes. It was a ripple effect he hadn't predicted, an invitation not only to express himself, but to cultivate others. He felt a rush of pride. This was not merely about revenge against Mark's derision, but an opportunity to extend the narrative of creativity and resilience beyond himself. This was the beginning of becoming a mentor, of actualizing his dreams. The gathering grew as whispers of his proposal circulated. Jack realized he wasn't merely a craftsman anymore. He was a catalyst for change, a potential guide to others on their own journeys. Yet a shadow remained. Could he be someone worthy of that role? Questions began to swirl in his mind, pushing him to confront feelings of inadequacy. He had overcome Mark's taunts, but could he overcome his own inner critic? Just then, Mark stepped forward, his demeanor oddly subdued. "You really believe you can teach?" There was a bite to his words, an undercurrent of challenge. Jack felt an instinctive urge to retreat, but instead planted his feet and met Mark's gaze fiercely. "Yes, I do," he replied, his voice steady, "and it's going to be fantastic." The crowd seemed to lean in with anticipation, the tension palpable. Jack most certainly felt the weight of his own words, spiraling with enthusiastic potential. Yet the question lingered, what if he failed?
What if those brave enough to join him stumbled because he couldn't lead them properly? In the depths of his thoughts, Jack recognized an essential truth. Personal growth often emerged in the most uncomfortable moments. It was not the absence of fear that defined bravery, but rather the act of pushing through it, embracing uncertainty while propelling oneself toward growth. Yet another reality loomed. If he wished to establish a workshop, he needed to confront his lingering inadequacies, to hone his skills not just in woodworking, but also in communication and instruction. Did he have what it took to foster a legacy of learning and creativity? As he stood there, poised at the edge of a new chapter, adrenaline coursing through him, he not only felt the thrill of potential, but also the knot of responsibility tightening in his stomach. The moment felt vibrantly alive, yet Jack understood it was just the beginning. With Mark's doubt glimmering in his periphery like a restless storm, he knew the next step in this journey would be arduous. He had to prove to himself that he possessed the strength to nurture others, to protect this fragile new identity he was forging. And as the whispers of excitement around him grew louder, he made a silent vow. This time, he would not run from the challenge. Instead, he would embrace the trials ahead, fully aware that defining his journey would require more than courage. It would demand resilience, commitment, and the audacity to fight for his story in a world that wouldn't always hold his hand. As he moved to address the crowd, an unsettling question nagged at him. Would he rise to the challenge of not just creating for himself, but empowering others as well? Jack stepped forward, feeling the gaze of the crowd settle upon him. Each glance felt like a small weight pressing down, urging him to speak words of substance and inspiration. He took a deep breath, letting the chaotic energy around him collide with his own inner storm of determination and doubt. Confidence, he realized, was a performance, not a constant state of being. "Thank you for your interest in the workshop," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. "It means more than you know. I want to share my process with you, not just how to create, but how to find your passion in this craft." As he spoke, analyzing his words, he noticed an unusual clarity emerging. This was not just about wood, but a way to instill hope, to spark creativity in those who felt as he once had, lost in the shadows of other people's expectations. Despite the excitement bubbling within the crowd, Jack's thoughts flickered back to Mark. The critical remarks still hung in the air like a lingering fog. Could he truly lead when someone like Mark was ready to doubt him at every turn? Perhaps in that moment he realized the workshop could serve a dual purpose. It could be a refuge not just for learners, but for himself to confront his fears head-on. Jack leaned into that notion. What could he teach? How could he guide others if he couldn't first reconcile his insecurities? He envisioned the workshop as more than just an opportunity to instruct. It could be a forum for sharing vulnerabilities. He could create a space for collective growth, where mistakes were not just acceptable but expected, where the act of crafting was its own raw and honest journey. As he continued to outline the potential structure of the workshop, he felt an unexpected surge of enthusiasm. By focusing on collaboration, he could simultaneously dismantle the walls of self-doubt he had struggled with for so long. He could foster an environment where success was defined not by the quality of the final product, but by the courage it took to express oneself creatively. The idea was exhilarating, a fresh dimension of purpose dawning within him. Yet doubt still clawed at the edges of his resolve. What if he fumbled when addressing the complexities of woodworking? What if he couldn't foster the engagement he envisioned? He began weighing the risks against potential rewards, the potential for profound rewards, both for himself and those who might eagerly join him in his workshop. Would the fear of failure cripple him, or would it ignite a fierce will to rise above it? In this internal struggle, Jack sensed an awakening of a latent instinct, the necessity to prepare himself. He needed to seek mentorship, to grow not only as a craftsman, but as a facilitator. Who could guide him in teaching? Who could challenge him to sharpen both his skills and his confidence? Could he reach out to his network, connect with others who had walked this path before?
Determined, Jack scanned the faces around him, noticing the eager expressions and nods of agreement. It somehow fueled his resolve, grounding the notion that he was no longer alone in this venture. These individuals were not just students, they were collaborators on a shared journey. In that electric moment, he seized the opportunity. "Let's set a date for our first workshop," he declared, his heart pounding with purpose. "We'll start simple, building small pieces. I'll share my techniques, but more importantly, I want to learn from each of you as well. Let's create a community of artisans where we can all share our journeys." Excitement rippled through the crowd, a wave of shared enthusiasm washed over him. The interplay of vulnerability and ambition forged a path he hadn't anticipated, awakening a revolution within him. But as the thrill pulsed through the air, an ominous thought echoed in Jack's mind. Could a mentoring role mean exposing his own inadequacies? Would he truly be able to wield authority in a domain where he still battled his own self-doubt? The reality of leading others weighed heavily on his shoulders, presenting a new layer of complexity he hadn't fully considered. Just as his doubts spiraled, he found strength in realizing that maybe his imperfections were his strongest asset.
They could inspire honesty and resilience in the group he hoped to guide. As he looked out over the enthusiastic faces, a mantra coalesced within him. Growth was a community effort. He would sink into this uncertainty, using it to cultivate not just his skills, but a deeper connection to those drawn to his craft. And yet, with Mark's penetrating gaze still lurking in his mind, another question reared its head. Was he truly prepared to face the fallout from stepping into this role, especially if it meant reconciling with his past failures? He took a breath. The journey stretched before him, a journey touching upon building not just with wood, but with hope and authentic connection. How could he transform his circus of emotions into a beacon for others? The moment was ripe for him to discover just how expansive his courage could be. Would he step into the light of accountability, ready to confront Mark's specter alongside his own fears? As the first workshop approached, Jack felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension coil around his chest. The days that followed his initial talk were a whirlwind of preparation. He pored over his notes, revisiting techniques he hoped to teach, while simultaneously grappling with a nagging voice that whispered doubts into his ear. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line and the light faded into dusk, he found himself standing in his small workshop, surrounded by tools that had once marked the boundaries of his own creative space. Now they felt like testaments of a past he was unsure he had truly conquered. Wood shavings, the scent of fresh cedar, and the comforting weight of chisels grew almost familiar again, but with the onset of the workshop looming, they also seemed tainted by the stakes he had unwittingly raised. Jack had taken to journaling at night, documenting not only his plans for the workshop, but also his insecurities. As he wrote, he often revisited the moment that had ignited this journey, the memory of Mark's sneering comments, the implications of failure that lingered on his tongue. What had first driven him away from confidence became a source of determination. He could not shake the feeling that, in confronting this, he would peel back layers of himself, layers long kept hidden by self-doubt. He had decided to mentor not just as a teacher, but as a collaborative guide, a choice signaling acceptance of vulnerability. But what would happen if he misplaced his words? What if the workshop didn't inspire others, but became a site of exposure for his own failings? Days before the workshop, as Jack took a long walk to clear his mind, he stumbled upon an old woodworker in the neighborhood, Mr. Davis. The elderly craftsman had always been a figure of quiet wisdom, and today, as Jack approached him, he felt a pull towards seeking guidance. After exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming workshop, Jack's hesitations began to flow.
"They're counting on me to teach, but I'm scared I'll let them down," Jack admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Davis studied him carefully, his eyes crinkling with understanding. "You're human, Jack. What makes a good craftsman isn't the absence of mistakes, but the grace with which we learn from them. Teach them that every project is an opportunity, not just for success, but for growth." His words reverberated through Jack's mind. He realized that his imperfections could indeed serve as a bridge, a way to connect deeply with the participants by sharing that they wouldn't be judged on their failures, but encouraged to embrace them. Jack left that encounter with a newfound resolve, recognizing that in focusing on others' growth, he might also achieve clarity on his own insecurities. The day of the workshop arrived, and the familiar nervousness in his gut twisted with excitement.
As participants filtered into his workshop, he noticed various expressions: anticipation, hope, and perhaps a hint of fear that mirrored his own. It was an unspoken acknowledgement of their collective journey, one he understood they were all about to embark upon. Jack stood at the front, ready to share his vision of woodworking, a craft that could carve not just wood, but the very essence of self-discovery. But just as he opened his mouth to speak, he caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Mark. There he stood, arms crossed, skepticism etched into his features like an immovable statue, a specter from his past challenging his newfound direction. The moment sparked a tumult of emotions within Jack, a swell of determination mixed with doubt that threatened to drown him as Mark's critical gaze bore down. But beneath that tumult, a flicker of awareness ignited. He could turn this into an opportunity, unearth the strength he had cultivated over the past weeks, and prepare to confront this lingering ghost. The workshop was more than just teaching others. It was the crucible in which he would reshape his own identity. Would he rise to meet the challenge of leading these aspiring craftsmen despite Mark's judgment? With adrenaline coursing through him, Jack took a step closer to the crowd. The time had come to face not just the expectations of those gathered, but the complex feelings he had long suppressed. As he found his voice, he understood. It was not the applause he sought, but the authenticity of connection, where every stumble could lead to profound growth. How would he transform the weight of Mark's disapproval into fuel for his own transformation? As he prepared to unveil his deeper intentions, new questions began to emerge, awaiting their answers in the raw moments of creation and collaboration ahead. In that charged moment, Jack felt the sea of eyes on him, all waiting for their leader to break the silence.
He took a deep breath and anchored himself in the fundamentals of woodworking, the craft that had once been his sanctuary and now was the tool for his transformation. "Welcome, everyone," he began, his voice steady yet warm. "Today, we're not just here to create beautiful pieces from wood. We're here to explore ourselves and learn from one another." He felt the tension in the room shift as he introduced the concept of failure as part of the creative process. He shared anecdotes of his own missteps, reminding them that every mark left on the wood reflected a moment of learning. For each failed attempt, there had been growth, and from that growth sprouted inspiration. Looking toward Mark, Jack noticed a flicker of surprise in his former mentor's eyes. That flicker quickly vanished under a veil of skepticism, but Jack didn't let it distract him. He was learning to embrace the uncomfortable. He refused to allow Mark's judgment to infiltrate his newfound resolve. The workshop unfolded like a series of unexpected revelations. Jack guided the group through tasks that blossomed with excitement and anxiety. He witnessed the awkwardness that transpired when someone forced a cut, and he allowed that moment to breathe. Instead of rushing to correct it, he encouraged them to analyze what had gone wrong. It was about unraveling the fear, about leaning into the discomfort rather than avoiding it. "Remember," he encouraged, "every chip of wood has a story. What you see as flawed can be transformed. Can you see the potential within the imperfection?" He began to notice changes. Participants started sharing stories of their past failures, creating a tapestry of vulnerability that knitted the group together. Familiar facial expressions softened with recognition as they slowly unpacked shared uncertainties. Jack amplified this connection by drawing parallels between woodworking and life. His passion became a vessel to explore their hidden depths. Yet, in the corner of his mind, Mark's skepticism loomed, casting shadows on their progress. Was he really making an impact, or was this merely an illusion of progress? These questions made Jack's heart race, but they also propelled him forward. He had come too far to retreat into the depths of self-doubt once more. At one point, during a quiet break, he observed Mark quietly scrutinizing a student's nearly completed project. Approach or retreat? The decision paralyzed Jack for a heartbeat. Then, gathering his resolve, he approached, hoping to break the ice. "Mark," Jack called, trying to keep his tone light but firm. "What do you think? Do you see potential in this one?" Mark paused for a moment, his critical composure faltering. "It might have potential if they correct the dimensions," he replied, his voice devoid of enthusiasm. "Just like life, right? Dimensions can be adjusted, and beauty often comes in the unexpected," Jack offered, a hint of defiance in his tone. "Or it can lead to waste," Mark countered coldly. Jack held his ground, the weight of his previous fear slowly lifting. "Or it can lead to growth, Mark. Would you agree with that?" Mark shifted uncomfortably, caught off guard by Jack's newfound assertiveness. Jack could sense that, despite Mark's hardened exterior, the challenge was stirring something beneath. The workshop continued, but Jack's mind raced with possibilities. Had he truly begun to unlock his own potential? Would this be the shift he needed for both himself and the others, particularly in the face of Mark's confrontation? As the sessions progressed, Jack realized that personal growth meant acknowledging not only one's strengths, but also the lingering doubts. Each interaction became an opportunity not just for teaching, but for reflection, both for himself and the part of him that still wrestled with the weight of Mark's opinion. And yet one looming figure, the very embodiment of his past fears, remained to confront. Would he allow himself to spark a crucial dialogue with Mark that could unfold into deeper understanding? Or would he evade the conversation lingering in the air like sawdust in the workshop? Tension and anticipation crackled, leaving Jack to consider what awaited him in this exploration of personal truths, even amidst the tumult of initiation. The morning light filtered through the workshop windows, casting warm, inviting hues across the wood shavings that danced along the floor. Jack stood at the front, observing the group, absorbing the transformations that had taken place over the past few days. They were hesitant, yet willing, a tribe learning not only the art of woodworking, but also the kind of inner repair that came from facing fears and failures head-on. Today, however, the stakes felt even higher. Jack's focus turned towards Mark, whose presence had both challenged and invigorated him. During the previous sessions, Jack had felt shards of doubt creep back in, especially when catching Mark's skeptical glare during moments of vulnerability shared by participants. As Jack prepared for a new exercise, a plan took shape in his mind. This wouldn't be just another hands-on project. It would be a deliberate confrontation, an opportunity to extend an olive branch. He wanted to integrate the dialogue he had postponed, to expose his intention to bridge the gap that had formed between them. "Today, we are going to work on something unconventional," Jack announced, stepping confidently into the space, determined to maintain his momentum. "We'll create an object that represents our journey, a symbol of not only our craftsmanship, but of our resilience. I encourage you to pull from your personal narratives and contribute pieces that resonate with your path." As the students began brainstorming, Jack seized the moment. And one of the most important elements of this process, one that I'd like to invite my friend Mark to explore with us, is honesty. It's not just about the wood, but about what we bring to it.
Jack's heart beat faster. He could feel Mark's eyes on him, the weight of expectation mounting. Would Mark accept, or would he retreat further into the role of staunch critic? The moment hung suspended in the air, thick with possibility. "Mark, how about you lead a discussion on what honesty means in your work?" Jack offered, a flicker of courage igniting within him. Mark's brows furrowed, surprise marring his normally stoic demeanor. "You want me to be part of this?" Jack interjected, his voice steady. "It's a chance for everyone, including you, to reflect on how transparency and authenticity can shape our creations." The silence that followed felt heavy, an anchor dropping into the depths of their unspoken history. Jack's internal turmoil swirled beneath the surface. Was this impulsive? Would he regret putting Mark in the spotlight? Mark shifted uncomfortably, weighing Jack's invitation, but for a moment, his vulnerability flickered through the cracks of his solid facade. "I can share," he said, although the reluctance in his tone was unmistakable. Relief flooded through Jack. This was it, the first step towards redefining their dynamic. The lines between mentor and disciple began to blur as they tackled challenges together instead of in isolation. Amidst a backdrop of chisels and sawdust, Jack felt both exhilarated and achingly vulnerable. Over the next hour, Mark begrudgingly led an insightful dialogue that unearthed truths about his own journey. Participants began to grasp the larger narrative. The interplay of self-doubt and ambition echoed not just in their creations, but within their very identities. With each story shared, techniques adjusted, and lessons absorbed, Jack's confidence grew. He recognized that personal and artistic development were intrinsically linked. Every flaw transformed, every layer of polish applied to the wood, mirrored their internal battles. But amidst the manifestations of growth, Jack remained acutely aware of unresolved tension simmering between him and Mark. As they wrapped up the session, Jack caught Mark's gaze for a split second, a fragile exchange of understanding, and perhaps an invitation to delve deeper into vulnerability together. "Next week's session will focus on collaboration," Jack announced, a hint of challenge in his voice. How we can combine our strengths to create something that is greater than the sum of its parts. The uncertainty hung in the air, electric yet thrilling. How would Mark respond to the idea of working together, not simply as teacher and student, but as partners grappling with their own vulnerabilities? As the workshop emptied, Jack's heart raced with exhilaration and anxiety. He felt the gravity of the conversation he had started with Mark. The desire to probe deeper into this unsettling tension was there, but would Mark step into the light of confrontation? Standing alone amidst the scattered tools, Jack realized the pivotal crossroads ahead.
The upcoming week would unravel the choices he had made and the challenges yet to come. He was ready to face them head-on, but would Mark join him on this journey into the unknown? The following week dawned bright and clear, the air laden with possibility, as Jack prepared for another workshop session. An undercurrent of excitement buzzed through him. He had driven the conversation forward, and now he was eager to see how Mark would respond to the new collaborative theme. As the first participants began to trickle into the workshop, Jack took a moment to ground himself, reminding himself of the importance of unity and vulnerability. While last week's session had laid the groundwork for personal growth, today would deepen those connections through collaboration. When Mark arrived, their gaze met, and Jack couldn't shake the feeling that a new chapter was about to unfurl. He approached Mark, who stood slightly apart from the other participants with his arms crossed, the usual air of skepticism intact. "Thanks for being here today," Jack began, his voice steady. "It'll be great to hear your insights on collaboration." Mark merely nodded, an inscrutable expression on his face. Jack took that as a good sign. It meant Mark was at least willing to engage, and Jack was determined to make it an enriching experience for everyone involved. "Today, we are going to create a collaborative project," Jack announced, surveying the eager faces before him. "This piece will embody our collective journeys, how we've evolved through challenges and triumphs. I encourage each of you to share your stories and techniques, intertwining them into a single creation. We will not only celebrate individual skills, but also explore how our different backgrounds can culminate into something extraordinary." As the group dispersed to gather materials and brainstorm ideas, Jack sensed the energy in the room shift. Conversations ignited, and eyes sparkled with the excitement of collaboration. It was the kind of creative synergy he had envisioned, a rich tapestry of voices blending together, crafting something meaningful beyond the bounds of individual competence. Mark watched the group with his arms still crossed, an observer rather than a participant. Jack felt a little surge of determination to draw him in. He moved closer, his voice low but resolute. "This is a chance for you to contribute something special," he said, gesturing toward a nearby pile of wood. "Your expertise could really enhance our design." For a moment, Jack feared Mark might resist, but to his surprise, the other man's brows relaxed ever so slightly. "All right," Mark replied, his interest piqued. "Let's see what we can come up with." Jack couldn't help the smile that broke through. They returned to the center of the workshop, where participants were already creating sketches and discussing plans. Mark stepped up beside Jack, and for the first time, it felt as though they were allies instead of adversaries.
"Let's start by combining our styles," Jack suggested, exhilaration burning brightly in his chest. "What if we create a piece symbolizing resilience? Each member can add their spin, contributing to the overall narrative." Mark nodded thoughtfully. "That could work, but it has to be strong. I propose a sturdy coffee table. Everyone always gravitates towards communal spaces." The others chimed in with excitement, the energy palpable. Jack could see motivation blooming amongst the group, igniting an artistic fire that pumped oxygen into their endeavors. Throughout the process, Jack and Mark found their rhythm, bouncing ideas off each other, challenging one another to dig deeper into their creative wells. Mark suggested traditional joinery techniques that Jack had only read about, while Jack introduced innovative embellishments that broke away from standard designs. As laughter and engagement filled the room, Jack realized he was no longer the cautious craftsman hiding behind self-doubt. He was now the confident mentor, leading by example. With each cut, each collaboration, he noticed his anxieties dissipating. The haunting shadows of ridicule he had felt were finally coming to a close. Midway through the session, Jack decided to share a personal anecdote about his own struggles with self-worth. "Years ago, I would have shied away from this opportunity to lead," he admitted, glancing at Mark, anchoring his thoughts in the moment. "I've learned that embracing vulnerability not only allows growth for myself, but opens a gateway for others." In the silence that followed, a few participants nodded in agreement, and Jack felt a sense of camaraderie swell among them. That bond solidified the workshop's purpose, to foster an environment of open communication where fear bloomed into courage and creativity flourished. After several hours of hard work, their communal piece began to take shape, a stunningly crafted coffee table adorned with meaningful engravings, each symbol inscribed with a word or image representing individual journeys. As they pieced it together, the workshop space transformed into a celebration of unity.
Amidst the laughter and discussion, Jack caught Mark's eye. For the first time, he could see a flicker of respect mingled with enthusiasm, a subtle acknowledgement that their confrontation had shifted into understanding. With each shared experience, the resentment quelled, planting seeds of respect where disdain had once thrived. As the day drew to an end, the coffee table stood proud in the center of the workshop, a testament to their joint efforts. Participants gathered round it, sharing their emotional connections to the project. "Let's commit to a finished piece together," Jack suggested, admiring the wood grains reflecting the light. "Let's unveil it at the next fair." Mark stepped forward, a rare smile breaking through. "That's an excellent idea. Our collaboration will speak volumes."
As applause rang out, Jack felt an overwhelming surge of triumph. This was the moment he had dreamed of, a culmination of growth, collaboration, and a reclamation of self-worth. He stood amidst a group of artisans, but more importantly, he stood firmly in his own identity. Yet as the cheering subsided, he turned to Mark, extending a hand. "Thank you for being part of this journey." Mark, taken aback, reciprocated the gesture, their hands clasping firmly. "Thank you for allowing me to grow alongside you," he replied, his voice unexpectedly warm. In that handshake, Jack felt the burdens of the past dissolve, replaced by a profound sense of achievement. He was no longer defined by others' expectations. He had crafted his path through resilience, creativity, and an openness to change. The workshop had transformed not only wood, but also relationships, both fragile and complex. And in that transformation, Jack had discovered unwavering confidence in the face of life's challenges. As the sun set over Maplewood, he vowed to embrace this newfound clarity. His journey was just beginning, and he stood ready to carve a legacy of compassion, collaboration, and artistry that would resonate through the years. Now, in this powerful resolution, it is time for you to engage in your own narrative. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that can inspire your path to greatness. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach people who need to hear these stories. Comment below with your reactions and theories about how Jack's journey resonates with your own. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and discover their own ability to overcome challenges. Join the journey now.